So let's see the story. Writing down what you know helps you learn and retain language. That's true. So building your own model of a domain can generate new meaning and new understanding, yielding insights that you may not have had otherwise. So React enables digital gardening by removing friction, giving us tools for interactivity and much more. So let's talk about defining features of a digital garden and how React plays a role in our writing and knowledge building. This topic is called hypertext thinking, building personal knowledge bases in public. And ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce Ryan Warner. Hi,
Hey,
Ryan.
Charlie. Hi, how's it going? Thank you for that
Very
introduction.
well, thanks. So tell us a few words just about yourself. Where are you from and why this topic? What inspired you?
Yeah, sure. I'm from New Jersey on the East Coast of the US. I'm working
Mhm.
at a company called which I'll go into a bit in my talk. um,
Sounds nice.
yeah, this topic is very inspiring for me because I often find myself forgetting things that I've learned and having to relearn them. And I found this practice of writing down what I know in a low friction, low commitment way helps
Mhm.
me move faster in the long run.
All right, that's amazing. In that case, go ahead. You have the time. 5 minutes before the session is gonna end, I'm gonna join the studio and I'll say 5 minutes left, then 2 minutes left, and then 1 minute left. That's it. In case if there's any request from the spectators, from the audience, in order to, I don't know, adjust your sound or something on the screen, I'm gonna join as well. Otherwise, I'm not gonna bother you. So have a nice time, and
Thanks,
that's
Charlie.
React Global Online Summit. And Ryan Warner, go ahead.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you for the awesome intro. Good morning, everyone, or whatever time of day it is for you. It's 9 a.m. here, so I'm still kind of waking up, sipping on some coffee. But today, I want to talk to you about communication or communicate about communication, specifically writing or thinking in public. Articulating what you know helps you learn and retain knowledge. By externalizing what's in your mind, what's in here, you can think about things in a different perspective and solidify what you know. So, how do we do this in a way that fits into our lives seamlessly? How can we maintain or increase our velocity while also building our own personal wiki? And that's what I want to talk about today. Hypertext thinking, building personal knowledge bases in public, also known as the practice of digital gardening. So, we're going to do a brief interlude to talk about myself. Hi, I'm Ryan Warner. On the internet, I go by Ryan Warner Codes. I'm the lead web developer at which is what I'm actually using right now to float on top of my slides or turn myself green or even bounce around the screen. We are hiring. So if you're interested in working together, definitely reach out on Twitter. We're also in a closed beta. I'm going to have a few invites to give out if anyone is interested. Um, I also live stream code and design on Twitch at twitch.tv/Ryan Warner Codes. So if you want to connect more, talk more, chat more after this, definitely follow me on Twitch and tune in there. I have a cat named Zora. If you go to my GitHub page, you'll see a picture of her and myself together. I'm also a retro gamer, play N64 and some modern games like Fortnite. So enough about me. What is a digital garden? So I did not make this term up. It's been around for a few years. So what better way to learn about this term than to look at some of the people who came before me and how they defined it or thought about it? The garden is web as topology, the web as space. It's the integrative web, the iterative web, the web as an arrangement and rearrangement of things to one another. This quote is by Mike Caulfield. He gave a keynote and later wrote an essay on this topic. It was really informative to me while constructing this talk, and also informed the way I think about digital gardens today. It's a bit long-winded, but I definitely encourage you to take the time to listen to that, maybe put it on the background while you're working or something. The links to this will be available. I'll make my slides available after this talk, so you can check that out. The next definition here is by Joel Hooks. The phrase digital garden is a metaphor for thinking about writing and creating that focuses less on the resulting showpiece and more on the process, care, and craft that it takes to get there. Joel is a co-founder of Egghead, where I am actually a rookie instructor. But more importantly, he has a great post, which you can see the link for there, on digital gardening and how he thinks about it. It is very concise and to the point, and there's a lot of great takeaways. So definitely check that blog post out. So Tom writes, a blog without a publish button, a space for connecting the dots. And I really like this phrasing, especially a blog without a publish button. It kind of illuminates how I want you to think about digital gardening, which is that it's low friction, low commitment. It's not like a published and refined and edited blog piece. It's more just, I had a thought or I learned a thing, and I'm going to put it in my garden or my personal wiki and make it public. And that's it. I don't need to worry too much about, editing grammar or making sure there's a cohesive storyline throughout. So these are all really great quotes. And here's my rendition. The digital garden is public thinking in hypertext. It's an organized collection of knowledge that grows over time and lives on the web. So that's my take on how I would define a digital garden. So we've had a lot of words here. I've given you a lot of words, but let's take a walk through some digital gardens and put some visuals behind what I've been talking about here. So here we are in Maggie Appleton's garden. Maggie has been an influential person in this space, especially recently. Definitely check out her site, maggieappleton.com. But there's a few key things here that I'd like to point out. So first of all, notice that these plants in her garden are not sorted chronologically. You can't even see a date here. I think that's an important defining feature of the garden. Another cool thing that she's got going is the emoji key that's kind of denoting how grown each of her plants are, which is a cool feature. So here is Tom's garden. He calls it a wiki folder, or experiment in hypertext thinking. This is a bit of a different look compared to Maggie's. But again, note that it's not sorted chronologically. Tom's is actually sorted alphabetically. There's no date attached to these. There's no glorious header image. This is just a group of knowledge, a group of topics that Tom cares about. So to recap, a digital garden is a collection of knowledge on topics. It's different than a blog in that pages are not sorted chronologically by date. Garden pages don't have a point to make or position to take. They are in various stages of completion. They don't know what they think yet. Out of this garden, however, we can grow blog posts that make a point, or tutorials to talk about how to implement the new React technology that just came out. So speaking of React, we are at a React conference, right? So where does React come in here? I think this quote by Maggie kind of leads us right into what role React plays in digital gardening. Maggie writes, digital gardening is low friction. Tending it shouldn't take more effort than a tweet. Just like a real garden, watering and clipping it is part of a daily ritual. So how can we be low friction in our gardening? Well, tools like Next and Gatsby, as well as MDX, enable us to write effortlessly. With some upfront planning and building, we can create tiny seedlings and grow them into fruitful trees, and then pick that fruit off and publish it as an essay, blog post, a screencast. We can grow interactive personal knowledge bases using powerful tools that we already know or are learning, specifically React and Markdown. We can learn in public. So here are some critical technical features that are my opinion. The Digital Garden is not limited to React by any means. Everyone has a slightly different interpretation. But these are some tools and features that I would want any garden of mine to have. So first of all, I'd want it to be statically generated. And this gives us a number of benefits. We have great search engine optimization. It's fast and performant, and also gives us social sharing features. I also really love Markdown, and specifically the MDX version of Markdown, which enables us to have React components sit right next to our H1s, paragraph tags, etc. Familiar Markdown syntax with interactive superpowers. This kind of brings our garden posts or blog posts to life. So some other features that are maybe less critical, search and filter, theming, bi-directional links, web mentions, syntax highlighting, the growth stage like the emoji key that we saw Maggie had on her garden, front matter, and get creative. There's no limit or set way that every garden has to be. It's kind of up to your imagination. What other features would you like to have? So we're going to take a look at a few of these with the remaining time, just at a high level. So I've been enjoying Next.js a lot recently. So we're going to start there. Next.js supports statically generated pages. And here's just a peek inside on how it does that. If you export an async function called getStaticProps from a page, Next.js will pre-render this page at build time. So simply by exporting getStaticProps, Next.js knows that this should be a statically generated page. And these props could come from anywhere. So we can grab our Markdown or MDX files and pass them into our component to render however we'd like. So Next.js also supports dynamic static routes, and we kind of have to do both of these things in order to have a dynamic route. So like a slug for each garden post or each blog post. So if a page has dynamic routes, for example, documentation, and uses getStaticProps, it needs to define a list of paths that have to be rendered to HTML at build time. And that's straight from the Next.js documentation. But on the left there is a bit of a code snippet on how I do this in my personal Next garden. So you can see I'm grabbing from the file system all of my MDX files in the content directory, and then mapping over them and returning a slug. And that's how my Next app knows what routes are statically generated. So I'm excited about Next, but there's other options too. Next MDX Remote kind of automates some of the examples I just gave, but there's also Gatsby with the MDX plugin, which I've used in the past with varying degrees of success. Also, there's Toast, an up-and-comer that is based around ES modules and is very performant. So you're not limited to any one technology. You can kind of pick and choose what feels right for you, what you're familiar with, based on your goals and your needs. So digging into a couple other features here, some of the less important ones, or less critical, I should say, more minor. In Next.js, we have to parse out the front matter ourselves. And there's a great little library called Gray Matter that lets us do this. So it takes an MDX file and returns an object containing the MDX content as a string with the front matter removed. and it also returns data as an object containing your front matter as key value pairs. So from here, we can pass this data to our page component and render it however we want. We might pass a title or maybe some tags in front matter to our component and then render that appropriately. Search is a feature that I find very important. As your garden grows, it's going to be increasingly difficult to find what you're looking for, both for you and your readers. So fuzzy search solved this issue. And I've really enjoyed working with Fuse.js, fusejs.io. And you can see I pulled out some of the two like critical lines here in creating a Fuse search. So given some data and some options, the data being your posts, your garden plants, MDX or Markdown, and some options like which fields should be searchable, as well as like a threshold for how fuzzy you want the search to be. We can then pass in a search value and get back some results. And I've also included a screenshot there from my personal site on me using this in practice in the real world. So as developers, we're probably often writing about code, and that usually includes code snippets. If you've used Markdown before, you're probably familiar with the backtick or triple backtick syntax. But with MDX, we can kind of take this to the next level by overriding the default code component, which MDX renders out, the semantic HTML pre and code tags. So by overriding this with our own components, we can create featureful code blocks, and we can take this however far we'd like. We can use syntax highlighting based on the language. Line highlighting, like you can see here in Prince's example. This example is taken from a tutorial by Prince on how to achieve line highlighting, which I find very important when writing tutorials and the code blocks are being built up over time. So what will you grow in your digital garden? I'd love to take a walk through your garden. So please feel free to tweet me with a link to your site. And lastly, I think I'm probably a little bit ahead of schedule here, but I do want to give thanks to Colby Fayak for inviting me to give this talk. This was my very first conference talk. So thank you, Colby. Geekle and the mods for making this possible. Maggie for her research on digital gardens, and the Party Corgi Network for community, inspiration, and accountability. So thank you for your attention the past 20 or so minutes. You can find these slides online at digitalgarden.dev. And that is it for me, Charlie. I don't know if Charlie's there. Well, I'm going to take a look at chat and see if we have any questions, because I think I'm a little early. Hey, Matthew Oladell, I see you're interested in working together. Definitely DM me on Twitter. DMs are open. Robert Tables, I see you. Thank you. Any questions? Looking for questions. Corey says, really interesting topic. Oh, there we go. Hey, Charlie. I think you're muted.
That's right. Thank you. Okay, so we don't have the questions right now because actually the Q&A session is gonna be a little bit later. It's
Okay.
gonna start at 15 UTC. So right now I'm gonna just switch to a different speaker, but then I'm gonna wait for you at 1450 UTC, as well
For the
as the other
panel.
speakers here for the panel. Yeah, and I'm gonna collect all the questions just for that.
Sounds good.
Okay, now I have just a few questions for you beforehand, before you're going, and also you kind of finished your presentation a little bit faster. So
Yeah, I did.
yeah, okay, uh, you didn't have to, but anyway. So as I told you before, knowledge base and creating a knowledge base, as for me, is quite important. I've been working as a support engineer and then as a project manager, so I know the importance of that very well. I cannot even live without a such a knowledge base, and I saw your recommendations for that. So, in general, just to talk a little bit more about this, could you please bring here your very first knowledge base, so how you came to that and why?
This is pretty new for me, actually, maybe in the past 6 months or so. So my very first knowledge base was built in Gatsby JS. And
Mm-hmm.
that's still alive today on my personal site, rw.codes. And I built that using the tools that we talked about here.
Okay.
So it's MDX and Fuse.js for search. And it's the design has kind of evolved over time.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was my very first true digital garden. I was blogging before that, but as I mentioned in the talk, digital gardening is significantly different than a traditional
Mm-hmm.
blog. So this way of thinking is pretty recent for me.
Okay, that's even better. Uh, let's then point the real, let's say the real actions. For example, for me, the first time that the knowledge base really served was when I was been working with a huge platform. It was it was an HPC platform, and there was a plenty of errors that I had to classify somehow. Errors, issues, signals, alerts that I had to somehow classify, as well as to define how to deal with them and then analyze that. So it really helped me when I realized that I'm actually investigating the same issue again and again,
Mhm.
and I realized that, well, okay, it could be really easier for me just to keep at least the story of how it was solved by different people, and then just to find out the best and fastest solution. So how it worked for you first time?
Yeah, that's interesting. So where did you keep that information? Was that on a private space on your personal computer, or where did that kind of knowledge base live?
Okay, it was a corporate Confluence by Atlassian.
Cool, cool. And to repeat your question, how did it work for me? Like, where did I first store that information? Uh, I think I started with Notion, just kind of jotting things down. I've since migrated to Obsidian as like my personal private garden or private
Okay.
wiki. Um, but in terms of Digital Garden, which is, in my opinion, specifically public, so it's not just your company, it's not just you, it's anyone who has access to the internet. My
Okay.
very first one, kind of like I said before, was Gatsby JS
Mhm.
and a Git repo, which, like I said, you can still see. I think I'm on the third iteration now, which you can check out at rw.codes.
All right, it sounds quite interesting. Cool. There's one question that can actually be asked just right now. Why not?
Awesome.
Uh, Perfect. So Jack from YouTube is asking a question. Says that I'm currently using Gatsby to create dynamic MDX pages. I was wondering if you could talk more about the issues you faced with Gatsby and why you like Next.
Yeah, good question. Issues I faced with Gatsby were around some of its limitations in that it really excels as a static site generator. And Next offers some more options in that, like server-side rendering, that I thought I might want to take advantage of.
Yeah.
Gatsby has a great plugin ecosystem, which Next has some plugins, but it's not quite as well developed. So Gatsby has, I think, an advantage there. With Next, I'm doing more by hand, but at the same time, I feel like I have more control because I'm not using 10 different plugins. I'm doing a lot of it from scratch, and the code that I'm writing is not necessarily super complex. So I'm not losing all that much time, and I am having to maintain this code. But like I said, I do have more control over exactly where my MDX files are coming from, how I might want to organize them in the local file system, and how those get represented in the URL.
Okay, sounds good to me. Brilliant. Then as the last question, okay, I will ask the one. It will be interesting to explore an Obsidian Markdown files to Digital Garden, publish in Flow, and add a specific front matter to publish.
Yeah, absolutely. My Obsidian Markdown knowledge base is currently just me. It's my private garden. But then from there, I kind of pick and choose which topics I want to make public, and then do so in a separate step. But I do think there is a world where you're publishing right from your Obsidian Markdown files, because the nice thing about Obsidian is that it's all files on your local file system, which is different than Notion, where it's all in the cloud, right? So you can back up your Obsidian Markdown files with a Git repo, or use it as a CMS to publish your garden from.
All right, sounds really good. Cool. In that case, we're now gonna have a 10 minutes break for everyone to get their coffees and so on. This will be actually the first break that we have here. Nice, you've got a cup. I actually
I'm
just
ready.
got this, but it has a nice squirrel. Okay, thank you, Ryan. We are waiting.
Thanks, Charlie.